I'd like to welcome everybody to today's presentation of Integrative Behavioral Health Care. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Snipes, and today we are talking about relationship skills or attributes, whatever you want to call them. And the mnemonic I created for today is CHAKRA. Now, relationships are one of our greatest buffers against stress. They can also be one of our greatest stressors. So having healthy relationships is really important. Having healthy relationships with ourselves, with other people, as well as, kind of with the world and with the universe, so to speak. Those relationships can help us feel empowered, can help us feel safe, can help us feel cared for. They promote the release of neurochemicals like oxytocin and obviously gonadal hormones like estrogen and testosterone. All of those things help increase the levels of serotonin and GABA and other neurochemicals in our brain that help us feel happy, that help us feel content, that reduce inflammation, that improve our immunity, that give us more energy so we have more energy to devote to the things, people, and activities that are important in our rich and meaningful life. So CHAKRA, I gave you a little time to think about it. CHAKRA stands for communication, honesty, awareness, kindness, respect and acceptance, and attitude of gratitude. Let's start with communication. Communication is so important. One of the biggest mistakes that a lot of people make in relationships is not communicating. And in order to communicate, first you have to be aware of what you need. So you have to be mindful of what you need, what you want to say. But you need to be able to communicate that to other people and not expect mind reading. How many times, and I think we've all done it, we've been in a relationship with somebody, friend, significant other, parents, you name it, and we've expected them to, quote, know what we wanted. We expected them to read our mind, to anticipate our thoughts, wants, and needs. That's not fair. We need to communicate our thoughts, wants, and needs so people don't have to guess. They don't have to go out on a limb and try to figure that out. When we do that, when we communicate those things, we are allowing them the opportunity to help us meet those needs. When we don't, and they don't meet our needs, then we feel rejected, ignored, disappointed, depressed, all of these things. And for what? For what reason? It wasn't a fair fight. We were kind of sending them into the arena blindfolded and going, good luck. Communication is essential. Even when it comes to things like holidays and presents and those sorts of things. Having open communication. I have my kids keep a running list, and all of our family, we keep a running list of things that we might want as gifts at holiday time. So there is no guessing, what would this person like? And, we can look through and at least get ideas. Maybe we're not going to choose specifically from that list, but we can get ideas about what they might want, what they might enjoy or appreciate. The same thing is true about what your preferences are. My husband learned, when we were dating, that I am not one of those people who really thrives on gifts, especially things like cut flowers, which die. Give me a potted plant any old day. But cut flowers, I'm not big on. Long stem roses are beautiful, but they die really quickly and they're really expensive. Get me a little rose bush instead. But how was he to know that unless I told him? And that's what is so important. Telling people about your expectations, about what you want, about what you need at that point in time. A lot of times, I'm not going to say all the time, but a lot of times our friends, family, significant others really do want to be able to help, but they may not know what to do. They may not know what we need when we're grieving, when we're depressed, heck, when we're happy. They may not know what we want or need at that moment. So unless we tell them, they may not be able to step in. Communication. It's essential. Now, there's a difference between passive, aggressive, and assertive. And I have several videos about communication skills on the website. But basically, we want to focus on assertive communication skills. And that's another issue that is really prominent right now, because aggressive communication says, my thoughts matter, my wants and needs and my ideas matter, and yours don't. Aggressive communication is oppressive, it's controlling, sometimes demeaning. And that is not a way to create a healthy relationship. Assertive communication skills say, my thoughts, wants, and needs matter just as much as yours do. You can have your thoughts, wants, and needs, and they can be different than mine, and that's okay. Both of our thoughts, wants, and needs are equally important. Let's see how we can arrive at some sort of compromise, win-win situation. Now, there's a little bit less, a little more assertive, aggressiveness maybe sometimes when you are a parent, talking to a young child. You may have to kind of quash some of those things. If they want to have, a candy bar right before dinner, you may not be able to agree to that. You can validate that that's their thought, want, or need, but then point out to them why that is not something that can happen. But in adult relationships, it's important to try to create win-win situations. It's important to try to synergize with the people in your life who are different. We all have different talents and abilities, and that is the beauty, because we can fit together kind of like puzzle pieces and be able to complement each other instead of trying to constantly compete with each other. So synergy and creating win-wins are really important. The third aspect of communication, and all three of these come from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. The third strategy is to make sure that you seek first to understand and then to be understood. So when you're in a relationship, instead of going in and saying, this is how I feel, this is the way I want it to be, walking into a situation and saying, what are your thoughts on this situation? And then understanding that person's point of view, paraphrasing what you're hearing to make sure you're understanding what they're saying, and then sharing your point of view. The same thing is true if you are a supervisor. That was one of the things I learned, very early on in being a supervisor, was that it's not usually very helpful to walk into a department to take over a position and then automatically, boom, start making changes. It's important to go in and learn about how that department functions, to observe for a little while, to understand what may be motivating the behaviors that you don't want and not motivating the behaviors that you do want. You need to seek first to understand. And the same thing is true in relationships, with your children, with your significant others. Seek first to understand. Get curious. Explore what may be motivating the behaviors that they are doing and any that they're not doing that you want. Why might those things not be motivated? Once you understand them, remembering that behavior is communication. More than 80% of our communication is nonverbal, but behavior itself, what I do, communicates something as well. So we need to look at people's behaviors because they do what is most rewarding at the moment, most of the time. So asking yourself, what is this? If the child is throwing a temper tantrum, asking yourself, what is this child trying to communicate to me? I've shared with you guys in other videos that when my son was little, he would go to school and he was evidently an angel at school all day long. And he tried so hard to always be on his best behavior when he was at school. And I would pick him up and he would come home and he would run around like a little banshee for, an hour, 2 hours. And it was frustrating initially because by that time of day, I was a little bit tired. I was trying to make dinner, but I stepped back and I said, what is this behavior communicating? What is he trying to communicate that he may not have the words or even the awareness of? And when I thought about it, I was like, he has been holding all this energy in all day long. And now he finally feels safe and free enough to let some of it out, to let his proverbial hair down. And I was like, okay, I get that. So then I was able to redirect his behaviors to something that was a little bit less intrusive in me while I was trying to make dinner or what have you, understanding that he needed to have that, kind of blowout time. So behavior is communication. Nonverbals are communication. What we say is really important, and we cannot expect people to read our minds. And please don't try to read other people's minds. That's one of my pet peeves. If somebody assumes they know what I am thinking or what I am getting ready to say, I'm like, pump the brakes here. Because a lot of times they are not quite on point. So communication is essential. Don't mind read and don't expect it. Be assertive. Pay attention to verbals, nonverbals, and behavior. Honesty. Well, that one really probably doesn't need a lot of explanation, but I will go back over the think mnemonic that we talked about yesterday. There can be such a thing as too much honesty. I remember there was one time we had a relative come over who was trying to be helpful in her sweetest, kindest way and suggested was constructively critical of the way my daughter was doing some things. And my daughter took great offense to it, as teenagers are known to do. Sometimes we need to pick our battles. Somebody may do something different than the way you do it. It doesn't mean it's wrong. So going back to think, if you're getting ready to say something to somebody, if you're going to be honest about your thoughts, your feelings, your wants, your needs, how you do something, whatever it is, remember, is it truthful? Well, obviously, we want to start there. That goes with honesty. However, does it need to be said? Is it helpful? And then we'll jump down to necessary. If it is not something that needs to be said, if it's not going to make a difference, if somebody keeps doing something one way versus your way, then maybe it's not worth putting it out there. Maybe it's not something that needs to be said. And too often, and I find myself doing this, it's one of the beauties in a way of social media and one of the drawbacks, but I may start to type a post or a response to a post and then I erase it and I'm like, you know what? That's not necessary. It may be honest, it may be truthful, it may be helpful, and I may have tried to say it in as kind and inspirational of a way as possible, but it's not necessary. So let sleeping dogs lie. And we could all, I think, really benefit from thinking that way. There is honesty. And, it is important to be honest. However, we want to, kind of figure out how much honesty is necessary. My son, bless his heart, he is brutally honest and has no filter. That whole necessary and inspirational just hasn't sunk in yet. He tries really hard, but he's almost always, it feels like always, asserting his opinion, even if it's not asked for. So we do want to look at, where too much honesty is. And that's a boundary that's going to be different in different relationships. You're going to have a different boundary with your children than you may with, somebody else. If your child makes you a gift in preschool, and I remember some of the gifts that I made for my mother, and I mean, bless her heart, she kept them for 40 years. But I look back at them now and I'm like, oh my gosh, that was ugly as all get out. What in the world? But I remember her displaying them. And, I'd give it to her and she would tell me how beautiful it was. And she was coming from the perspective of a mother. It was a beautiful thought that I had tried to make it. And she didn't go the other step of, brutal honesty, of trying to point out all the flaws that it had so I could, quote, get better. She accepted it gracefully and was honest about her appreciation for it. But, again, didn't want to quash my enthusiasm. So honesty is one of those things that we need to figure out how to navigate with different people. Now, with adults, we can be a little bit more honest sometimes. And you just have to figure out what that is in each relationship. There is no hard and fast rule. Moving down to awareness. Well, we need to be aware of our impact on others and their impact on us. And it's important to recognize the bidirectional interaction. If you are feeling overwhelmed and just completely worn out every time you spend time with a certain person, you need to be aware of that dynamic and be curious about why that is. It may not have anything to do with you. It may have more to do with that person. And then you need to decide how you're going to set boundaries to protect yourself from getting too worn down. Occasionally you may have one of those friends who, it always has some kind of drama going on and always seems to be in crisis. Every day you're getting calls and texts and emails and this and that. And you've got to be aware of their impact on you and how you respond to them and what resources you have, maybe to diffuse some of that attention. So what other people could they call? What else could they do? But also being aware of your impact on them. What are you doing in the relationship? Are you being aware of their needs? And generally in relationships, we take people for granted. Unfortunately, in a lot of situations, we don't pay attention to the people that are so important to us in our life. We aren't aware kind of their existence until we need them sometimes. And that is not a way to build a healthy relationship. We need to give people and relationships attention. The same thing is true with ourselves. We need to be honest and communicative with ourselves. We need to be aware of what we need, and we need to give attention to ourselves, making sure that we are enhancing ourselves, we're growing, we're nurturing ourselves on a regular basis. Because if we're completely depleted, then we don't have any energy to give to those other people and things and experiences in our life that are so important. Which takes us down to kindness. It is essential to be kind when at all possible. And even when you've got to set boundaries, even when you've got to say no, you can try to do it in a way that is kind as possible. And with kindness comes compassion. When you're aware that your friend is struggling, maybe they're grieving, they're depressed about something, they're stressed out about something, what can you do to be kind? And this awareness and attention and kindness and compassion, some of that can be accomplished through random acts of kindness, through using their love languages to communicate how important they are to you. You don't have to do it every day, but it is really meaningful when you do it periodically. I remember even with my staff, I would just periodically, randomly leave, notes on their desk or give them kudos for something that they did. And it wasn't all the time, but it was always or almost always meaningful or seemed to be meaningful to the people when I did it. If I would, refer some documentation they did to the CEO because it was so eloquently written. I mean, anything that I could do to compliment them, to reward, reinforce what they were doing, I couldn't give them a raise, but, as much as I could do, in order to be kind and compassionate, trying to use their love language whenever possible. Respect and acceptance is another component or attribute of a healthy relationship. And that kind of goes back to some of the other things we were talking about with communication. We need to respect that other people have different talents, different needs, different preferences, different thoughts and ideas and worldviews. We need to respect that the way they think, what they do, how they interact has been shaped by all of the experiences they've had up until now, which are different from ours. So they have a different, what we call phenomenological reality. We can respect that. They see things differently. We may need to accept, that whole agree to disagree. We may need to accept that they have a different point of view. It doesn't necessarily mean their point of view is wrong and ours is right, or vice versa, but they may have a different point of view. And that's where good communication is really helpful and essential. For example, I have a very dear friend of mine who is an atheist, and I'm a Catholic. We have very different views on spirituality. I respect his decision to be an atheist. I'm not going to try to convert him or to evangelize. And he respects my faith in God and Jesus. And he is accepting of when I make references to my spirituality. He doesn't poke fun at them. He doesn't condemn me for them. He doesn't agree with them. I know this, but he accepts that that's part of who I am. And that can be very challenging in relationships. And, excuse me, I chose religion because surprisingly enough, right now, that is a less hot button topic than some other topics. But it's important to recognize right now, especially in our current environment, there are a lot of issues that are extremely polarizing, and we need to be able to respect other people have a different point of view and then get curious. I respect and accept that my stepfather has different points of view about things than I do. So help me understand. I still may not agree, but help me understand why you see something that way. And that is so important. I have other friends who are married and they have, one is, conservative, the other one's liberal, one is Catholic, the other one is Jewish. There are a lot of differences among friends that I have in their relationships, but one of the keys is they respect one another's beliefs and say, okay, I may not agree, but to each his own. Attitude of gratitude is the final component of what we're going to talk about for somewhat essential relationship attributes. And that is being grateful for what people bring into our lives. They may have some behaviors that we don't like. They may have some preferences, attitudes, thoughts that we don't like about, how things should be done. Okay. None of us is perfect, but having an attitude of gratitude for how they enrich your life, for the things that they do bring to your life, is really important. And focusing on your commonalities, focusing on your strengths. Even, with my friend who's the atheist, I'm grateful to have that relationship with him in a way that is respectful and accepting, because we can have open discussions about our points of view, and I can learn from him. I can learn about his perspective if I want to. So I'm grateful that I have that resource out there. I'm grateful for, a lot of other ways that he influences, I guess is the word, or other things that he brings enriches my life as a friend, as someone who I can count on to be there for me, even if we don't agree on everything. And I think I believe at this point in history, let's say, focusing on our similarities, focusing on our underlying, what is it that we all want? To be healthy, to be safe, to be happy, at peace. So, we may disagree on what that looks like or how to get there, but ultimately we all want the same thing. We all want to survive. And focusing on our similarities, focusing on what people bring to our life instead of, how they irritate us or what they detract, can be helpful. Now, obviously, you have to keep yourself safe. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying ignore things if they're stealing from you or being abusive or anything. Obviously not. But what I am saying is enjoy your similarities. Enjoy your commonalities. There are friends that I work with in volunteer work that have very different points of view than I do, but we all can agree on animal rescue. We all can agree on what needs to be done for these precious little creatures. So we focus on that, and we avoid those other topics that may be hot button topics if we know that, it's not going to end in a good discussion. And sometimes that's important, knowing that there are certain topics that are just not going to be safe to discuss with people. Sometimes when we disagree with people, they feel threatened, they feel attacked, and they will respond with anger. So if even broaching a topic with somebody is going to trigger them and make them feel threatened, then that may be one of those areas where that honesty, remember, maybe we just don't go there. Maybe we just don't need to share with them honestly and openly everything about what we think about that. Maybe that's one of those things we just keep to ourselves in that situation. Imagine how much better family reunions would go if people kind of considered, not poking the bear, so to speak. So relationship skills, communication, essential. Don't mind read, don't expect mind reading. And remember that communication is verbal, nonverbal, and behavioral. Be honest, but not honest to a fault. Be aware of those relationships and nurture them, and be aware of your impact on other people and other people's impact on you. Be kind and compassionate whenever possible, because most of the time, most people really aren't doing something to be hateful. They are doing something either out of fear, out of, responding to a threat, or because they don't know other ways to do it. So trying to be kind, trying to be accepting, or at least curious to understand other people's behaviors, and being compassionate. Recognizing that their life is different, their life experiences are different than ours. Respecting and accepting other people, and being grateful for every single person that touches your life, from the cashier at the grocery store to your children and your parents, how they touch your life every single day. And trying to do something, and this kind of goes along with kindness, trying to do something for them every day when you interact with somebody that they can be grateful for. Even if that's just smiling, even though with a mask you can't see it, but smiling, having a nice word, saying hello, asking them how their day is going, and actually being genuinely interested can make a huge difference in the life of, well, anybody. Have a wonderful day. Have an amazing weekend. Try to find something to look forward to this weekend or to do this weekend that you are going to thoroughly enjoy and that's going to bring peace, happiness, and a sense of contentment.